Hey, hello folks, this is Sullla here once again. We're going to be looking at another patch. This is patch 3.5 for League of Legends. There's not a great name for this patch. The only thing I can think of is this is the unnecessary Nerf Akali patch. As you might, I'm sort of anticipating the changes, but there's no new champion and there's no major change to the overall gameplay in this particular patch. So I guess we'll just go with patch 3.5. This is relatively minor patch. Let's just go through. Hopefully this won't be quite as long as some of the other patch reviews. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, let's see. Akali. Akali getting nerfed very heavily. And I'm not sure why. Akali is not really being used in competitive play. And she was just nerfed in the last patch before this. So your guess is as good as mine. Somebody doesn't like Akali. Mark of the Assassin, this is Akali's Q, is getting a major nerf in damage. I think this is her Q. I could be wrong. I don't play Akali, but this is sort of her bread and butter laning skill. Initial damage reduced at all ranks, starting at rank 1 all the way up to rank 5. It's 10 fewer damage at rank 1, 30 fewer at rank 5. They've increased the AP ratio. Hooray! Now when you have 300 AP, you will do the same amount of damage that you used to do with no ability power. So yes, you need at rank 5, you now need to have 300 ability power to do the same amount. And, oh, you need more than 300 to do extra damage. So, yeah, you have a very slightly higher AP ratio. But don't be fooled by that. This is a major nerf to Akali's damage. And they've also then nerfed her ultimate as well. Shadow Dance, charge rate increased to 35 seconds instead of 25 seconds at rank 1. And it does go down to the same 15 at rank 3. But that is a pretty big nerf because that doesn't restore it to the old value until level 16. Again, I do not understand this change. Akali is not dominating play. Akali is was not really that strong before this, and now Akali is much weaker. Akali needs to snowball ahead. If she does not do that, then she becomes essentially useless, and this will make it much harder for her to snowball ahead in the laning and early mid-game phases of League of Legends. So Akali got hit very hard for essentially no reason, in my opinion. And she is not going to be a very good champion at all after this. You will not see her played competitively, and you will see much less of her in other games as well. So I do not understand this. I think it is a poor change. This is probably just Riot reacting to low elo players who don't understand how to play against Akali, and I guess the forum complaining was too much. So congratulations, Akali is now very weak. Which is funny because Zed, who is very strong and has played non-stop in competitive play, was completely untouched in this patch. So I do not understand this at all. All I can say is this really does not make any sense. Corki has not been played in quite some time. He kind of dropped out of the competitive scene. He is getting some minor buffs. This is something that will definitely help him. This is to his ultimate, his missile barrage. Now fires a big one every third missile instead of every fourth. That is pretty nice. The big one deals quite a bit of damage. And the charge rate is reduced with more points in his ultimate. Instead of every 12 seconds, now down to 8 seconds at level 16 at 3 points in the skill. This is a pretty good buff. Pretty nice. Corki has just sort of not really fit in with the competitive scene recently. There's been less focus on champions that have easy escapes, champions like Ezreal, Corki, and so on. More focus on champions that are good at pushing, because typically the professional teams will do the 2v1, 1v2 lane swaps, and that puts a primacy on champions that can push quickly. Champions like Caitlyn have been very popular. Champions like Draven have been popular as well. And the other thing that people do is like I said, because it's just not as much 2v2 in bottom lane. It's more about champions that do well in late game. So you've also seen a lot of Twitch, a lot of Vayne in a lot of these games, and champions like Corki, who are known more for their laning phase but don't push necessarily all that hard, have not really fit in. But I think there's a decent chance we will see Corki at some point soon, because this is a pretty nice buff, and he got another one in an earlier patch recently too. This actually does help him quite a bit, so you may see a little bit more Corki. At some point, someone's going to start playing him in professional play, and then everyone's going to suddenly rediscover Corki, and he will be back. The biggest changes in this patch are for Karma. When Karma was reworked, people started playing Karma. It turned out, hey, guess what? Karma's actually still pretty terrible. And some people thought that she actually got worse after the remake. I'm not entirely certain of that, but she was not, her win rate was very low, and it wasn't just due to new people who didn't know how to play her trying to play as Karma. She genuinely was not very strong. She still does not really seem to fit that well as a support, And as an AP mid laner, she just doesn't seem to fare that well. So these changes are designed to help her. Will they do that? We'll see. We will see. I still think that she is not the strongest choice in mid, but we'll see. They have, this is a buff to her passive. The mantra cooldown is cooldown reduction increased to 2 seconds at all levels instead of 1.52. That's nice. Karma's problem is still that her mantra just doesn't feel that good. It feels like it needs a shorter cooldown overall. Cooldown reduction is very, very key on Karma. So this helps, but how much will it help? I'm not sure. The fact that she still doesn't really have an ultimate is still a major problem, because Karma's skills, even when they're buffed with Mantra, don't really feel like an ultimate. They just feel like a slightly stronger normal skill. And a lot of people just think she's not that satisfying to play. Okay, anyway, her Q in her flame detonation area now occurs at the actual point of missile impact instead of the center. Okay, that's a little quality of life just as to where the detonation effect occurs. Not that big of a deal. Point of impact instead of the center of the initial target. Very minor quality of life. Focused Resolve, this is her W, if I've looked at this correctly. They reduced the mana cost, that's nice. Reduced it down. The scaling has gone down, so it's only 90 at max rank, which is 6 points in the skill on Karma. No, actually it's 5. That's right. They've changed how she works, so it's 5 points. Decrease the mana cost. This I'm not entirely sure. Now applies Gathering Fire's effect on each instance of damage dealt instead of only once on initial application. Now deals damage 3 times over the duration instead of 6. So Gathering Fire, oh, I see. That is the passive application. So it applies the passive on each instance of damage dealt, and now deals damage 3 times instead of 6. Okay, so this is designed to help this. That means that the passive applies more often on the mantra cooldown, and that the damage hits 3 times instead of 6. Will this really help? I'm not so sure. One of the biggest problems with Karma is in order to use this skill, you have to get up close. This is a very short range skill. This is the replacement for her old jump rope, her old spirit bond. And Karma's a very squishy AP caster. So when you put yourself in that kind of range, you put yourself in a lot of danger. Now, don't get me wrong, you heal. If you mantra this, you're healing for a lot while you're using it. But the short range really makes it an issue because it forces Karma to place herself in danger in order to use this skill. And remember, she only has 3 skills. She does not truly have an ultimate. So to put yourself that close, if you don't get up close, you really only have your Q, which pokes away, and the shield, which is not that great. So, I mean, her kit's just kind of problematic in that way. Okay, Inspire, let's see, this is her shield, this is her E. Increase the duration on movement speed, but only by 2/10 of a second. I don't see that doing that much. I mean, it's nice, but it's not that big a deal. Fixed a bug on the tooltip. Not much of an issue. It doesn't actually change the skill. This is the biggest change to Karma's kit. The mantra'd version of her shield of Defiance. Movement speed bonus is now always 60% instead of 20, 30, 40, 50, 60%. And the allied shield haste range increased, so 700 range instead of 600. This is a big deal because this means that her shield is now very clearly her 1-point skill. Karma is intended to put 1 point in her E and max her Q and W first. This is now how she's intended to be played. This also means that she is not that good of a support. Her kit has been shifted more towards an AP caster, because now you're clearly intended to put 1 point in her shield and get the 60% movement bonus now that you don't need to rank it up. So does this help Karma? Yes. Does it help her enough? Probably not. I was a bit bullish on Karma when I saw her initially, but that was before I saw the numbers. Once I saw her actually played, I've been much less optimistic about her. I do not think that this is going to be enough to make her a viable mid. And I'm worried about Riot buffing her too much to making her overpowered, because her W, if they overbuff this, she will be almost unkillable in mid if they overbuff her. So be very careful what you do here, Riot, or she will be overpowered. But as of right now, probably still not a great pick. Not a great pick. She clearly needs to take a solo lane. She's not that good as a support. And her W just means she has to put herself in too much danger to be effective. Okay, so Kayle. Steady nerfs to Kayle. She is steadily being nerfed back down into unplayable range. They have nerfed the range on her Divine Blessing. This is, I believe, her W, her heal and movement speed boost. That's not a huge deal, but the range was strangely high at 1,000. It's now been reduced to 900. Okay, that's pretty minor. This is much bigger. The cast range on her ultimate intervention was 1,200. Everyone was like, what? Why is the range so enormous on this? I mean, the range for her intervention was like the range of Xerath's ultimate, roughly. Almost as, I mean, it's not quite that high, but very close to it. And people are like, why can Kale use her ultimate from like the other side of the Dragon and Baron pit to save someone? It didn't really make sense. So they have scaled this back to a more reasonable 900, which is still quite high, but not quite as ridiculous. Anyway, Kale steadily getting nerfed. Her win ratios have dropped pretty heavily. She's still being used in competitive play, but I don't think she's going to be used too much longer because she has been hit very hard with the Nerf bat. And deservedly, don't get me wrong, deservedly hit with the Nerf bat. She was very, very strong. But she's steadily dropping, and will probably not be used that much going forward. So, sorry, Kale. You had your moment of sun in the sun, your moment of glory, but those days are rapidly coming to a close. Lux has been immune from nerfs for a very long time for no apparent reason, even though she was a very strong pick for months and months and months competitively, but has finally gotten a nerf here. They have nerfed her movement speed. This is a smart nerf. For some reason, Lux had the movement speed of a melee champion despite being ranged. For those who don't know, the movement speed of melee champions are typically much higher than ranged champions. This is to help them catch up to the ranged champs, to help them close the gap and do their damage. So her movement speed was strangely very high, and it didn't really make sense because as her role was sort of a stand back and pokey poke at people champion, didn't really make sense that it was so high. So this is a smart nerf to reduce the base movement speed. This will make it more difficult for her to kite, which is one of Lux's key abilities. She's very good at just running backwards and shielding herself and kiting with her pull and her binding. So this is, like I said, this is a good nerf, intelligent way to nerf her. Just make it so it's more difficult for her to pull off some of her ridiculous plays. And the nerf to her final spark, her ultimate. They've nerfed it at the max rank. The 40-second cooldown now up to 50. This is a pretty big deal. That is a major increase in the cooldown on her ultimate. So no longer the 24-second ult with max cooldown reduction. Now at 50, it is a, let's see, 25%. What is that? It's about a, 25% of 50 is what, 12? 12, is that right? No. Yeah, I'm struggling to do the math here for some reason. 50 divided by 4. Yeah, it's about 12. So now it is like a 38 second. No, wait, 40. No, never mind. 40% cooldown reduction. Duh. It's now 30 seconds. Okay. I don't know why I was struggling with that so much. It's now 30 seconds on the ult with max cooldown reduction. So that's significantly longer. So Lux will probably still be played, but this does hurt her a bit. Morgana has gotten buffs. Morgana, not really sure why people stopped playing her. Morgana's always been a pretty strong pick. She just kind of fell out of favor for no real reason. Not really sure why. She's still always been a strong pick. They've reduced the mana on her Q. This is actually very nice, particularly at max rank. Now only 90 mana instead of 120. That's a big deal. That means she's less dependent on things like Rod of Ages. Morg can skip building mana and focus more on other stuff. Maybe things like she used to build Abyssal a lot and things like that. So that's very nice. And then the Soul Shackles, the mana cost reduced to 100 at all ranks from 100, 150, 200. That was a pretty expensive ult in terms of mana. To cut it down to 100, this is a pretty sizable buff. Again, Morgana, not really a weak pick. It's just people kind of got tired of playing her and stopped playing her. But a really good choice. In fact, just yesterday, as I record this, in the North American LCS games, Nijaki of Team Curse played Morgana and played really, really well. Just played a very, very strong Morgana game. And that was before this buff went through, by the way. They were not playing on the new patch. So, Morg, always a strong pick. People just not using her. But feel free to use her. It's like, people are like, oh yeah, Morgana, we just totally forgot about her, even though she's always been a good pick mid. Maybe people will use her again now. Okay, Nami. Title range, Nami's steadily been getting buffs. I think she's actually pretty good right now. She just has a very high skill cap. She's one of the hardest supports to play in the game. And that's why people typically don't play her a lot. But it's not that she's bad. She just is very difficult to play because of the way that her bubble works. It's a difficult skill shot to hit. Anyway, these are buffs to her ult. The range has been increased even further. It already had ridiculous range, 2,500. Now it's even more ridiculous, 2,750. You can hit people from a mile away with her ultimate. It's very slow, but the range is incredible. They've reduced the cooldown again. Now it's only 120 at rank 1 as opposed to 140, so that's very nice. And the mana cost reduced very sizably, 100 at all ranks, down from 100, 150, 200. I mean, again, big buffs. She's been getting buffs to just about all of her skills. So again, if you like the Mermaid, I think she's a good pick. I think she's very solid. She just is hard to play. You need to get some practice in using her Q and using her W. I believe that's her heal. I think her W is her heal. The one that both heals and harasses. It's a difficult skill to use properly. But if you know how to play Nami, she's a good choice. Feel free to use her. She's quite good. One of the other big changes in this patch is Nautilus got very big buffs. Nautilus was a great jungler in Season 2. He was hurt a lot by the Season 3 jungle. They have made some changes to make it easier for him to jungle, so they've increased his base armor. That's actually quite nice. This will make it easier for him to jungle early. He will take less damage from the camps. And his bread and butter skill, his shield, Titan's Wrath, they have reduced the cooldown, which was obnoxiously, ridiculously long, at 26 at level 1 down to 22. And then the scaling is such that it goes back to 18 at rank 5. This is a very big deal. His shield is what allows him to jungle. It gives him attack speed, and it also protects him from damage. Great skill. It was just on too long of a cooldown. So this helps him. And one of the item changes, Spirit of the Ancient Golem, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, that is another item change that really helped Nautilus. So expect to see him in the jungle a fair amount. Nunu got a buff here. A strange buff. They buffed his ultimate, which is a little bit weird. They reduced the cooldown from 150 down to 110, and that's actually a very big buff. They cut the cooldown by about a third there, and then they cut the mana cost too. For some reason, they're cutting the mana cost on a lot of the skills in this patch. This is nice for Nunu, but at the same time, I'm not sure it really does that much to help him, because people don't play Nunu for his ultimate. They played him as a support for Blood Boil, which got heavily nerfed in earlier patches. And they played him in the jungle because he was really good at counter jungling. But Season 3 is not really about counter jungling. That was very popular in Season 2, not so big in Season 3. So Nunu still doesn't really fit in that well. Reducing the cooldown on his ult is nice, but it doesn't really solve the problems that Nunu have, which is that his Blood Boil's been too heavily nerfed to see him used as a support, and he doesn't fit that well in the current jungle is the problem. So, I mean, yeah, it's nice he can ult more often, but that wasn't really the problem before. So, I mean, while this is a nice quality of life buff, it doesn't solve the issues he had. So I don't see this leading to people suddenly playing Nunu, because what he really needs is he needs his Blood Boil buffed again, which I don't think they should do because he was overpowered when they buffed his Blood Boil. But he's just in an awkward place. He doesn't fit in very well. Maybe if they did something to his Ice Blast, but as is, his ult, you know, reducing the cooldown is not going to really change Nunu's place in the game. Okay, Quinn. It's widely known by now that Quinn is terrible, and she's just a very poorly designed champion. I don't think you can fix Quinn without a rework. I really don't. Not without just making her overpowered. Her kit makes no sense. I mentioned this right when she came out, that this was a problem, that her ult really does not make any sense on an AD. So they're changing her passive so that Valor marks targets slightly more frequently. Woohoo! Now she's slightly less terrible. And on Vault, she now lands closer to her target when using Vault from far away. Great. Great. Wonderful. Quinn is still terrible and no one is going to play her. I'm sorry, but her kit makes no sense. It's not good. She's probably the weakest AD in the game right now amongst regular ADs. The ability to go into melee range as an AD is not something you want. So she has an ult that allows her to not become a ranged AD. Maybe if they buff her, maybe she can be good top or mid, but she just does not fit in as an AD carry. And her kit really needs a complete rework, which is not going to happen anytime soon. So sorry, Quinn, but nobody likes you, and you're really bad. Urgot, bug fix. They're now displaying the lock-on range. So I guess that's nice, but that's not really going to change the equation. Urgot fits into sort of very specific team comps, but he's not very good in solo queue because he needs the proper environment to work. He also paired really well with Taric, and Taric has sadly been nerfed, so Urgot is not in the greatest shape. This is nice to be able to see the range, but not that great. Volibear. Volibear has gotten a nerf, a deserved nerf. He has been very, very popular in the competitive scene. It's a smart nerf. I like this one from Riot. They've changed it so instead of getting 45% speed at all ranks on his Q, which was the 1-point skill on Volibear, and still is the 1-point skill on Volibear, it's been adjusted to a scaling movement speed percentage. So now you need to put more points in the skill to get that same movement speed boost. Again, very smart. Q, his Rolling Thunder, his Q is his 1-point skill. Now you don't get quite a ridiculous bonus from just 1 point. You need to invest more points in the skill to get the same bonus. Again, that's very smart. Will this stop causing people to play Volibear? Heck no. Volibear is still really smart, really strong. He's going to need more nerfs than this to get people to stop playing him in the jungle. They're going to have to go after his passive or his W to get people to stop playing him. He's still really good. He clears the jungle super fast. His passive is awesome for team fighting, and the items in Season 3 are perfect for him. Locket is great. The reworked Bulwark is really good on him, and in fact, this new Spirit of the Ancient Golem really good on him as well. So Volibear just the item changes in Season 3 fit him perfectly. Then we have a couple item changes. Changes to Spirit of the Ancient Golem. This item used to give armor. They've changed it so it does not grant armor. No more plus 30 armor. Instead, it now builds out of Kindle Gem, and it now grants 10% cooldown reduction. This hurts some junglers. This item is now not very good on Rammus, for example, because of the armor. It no longer gives armor. But it is very good on a lot of other junglers. For instance, it's very good on Nautilus. The cooldown reduction is perfect. He is very, very dependent on cooldown reduction. It's actually pretty good on Volibear too. Very good now on Nasus jungle as well. Nasus is heavily dependent on cooldown reduction. So on some of these junglers, this is really good. On other junglers, it's not so good. Junglers who are more reliant on armor. It's actually quite good on Udyr now too, because he's pretty reliant on cooldown reduction. So for some junglers, this is good. For other junglers, it's not so good. The item overall is not really nerfed or buffed, it's just changed. The item is 300 gold cheaper, which is again good. For most junglers, that's good. And it no longer grants armor. So overall, this doesn't really hurt the item, it just makes it a little bit different. For many junglers, this is actually a buff to this item. Actually a buff for a lot of junglers. And so you will see this being built on a lot of junglers who want that cooldown reduction, which is quite a few of them. Elder Lizard, similar deal. They have reduced the attack damage by 5, and they've made it 300 gold cheaper. So it's now 2,000 gold instead of 2,300. This is not much of a change. If anything, this is a slight buff to Spirit of the Elder Lizard, because 5 AD is worth, let's see, a longsword is 400 gold, and that's 10. So the going price for 5 AD is roughly 200 gold. So by making it 300 gold cheaper and only reducing attack damage by 5, this is a buff for this is a slight buff to the item overall. And it's just useful because you can finish the item faster. So this makes the item a little bit better overall. It's just not as good in extreme late game. But for most junglers, again, this is better. So these spirit items, Golem, Lizard, and Spectral Wraith are all quite good. Early on in Season 3, they were all considered to be pretty terrible, but they've been getting steadily buffed, and they're actually quite good now. All of the Spirit Stone items are actually quite good. So I'd encourage people to buy them. And hardly anyone is building Wriggles anymore, so that item may need some adjusting, because the Spirit Stone items are, in most cases, just better items. Seraphs Embrace getting a slight buff. The active mana cost is reduced from 25% to 20%, and the active shield is increased. Instead of 25% current mana, it's 20% of current mana plus 150. I haven't run the numbers, but this is a larger shield in most cases, is my understanding. So to get 150, let's see, so in order to have 5%, how much mana would you need to get in order to get 150 on 5%? Okay, hold on, let me see. 2,000 times 1.05. If you have 2,000 mana, then you get a 100 shield. At 5%. So you need to have more than 3,000 mana for this to be a nerf, and that's pretty rare. So in all cases where you have less than 3,000 mana, this is a buff. So for nearly everyone, this is a buff. Maybe on Rise, this is a slight nerf, but on virtually everyone else, this is a buff to Seraphs Embrace. The flat shield amount, I think, is pretty nice. Oh, and again, remember, it's current mana. It's not max mana. So you would have to have more than 3,000 current mana for this to be a nerf, and that's very rare. You're not often walking around with 4,000 mana on your champion currently. So this is pretty much a straight buff. A little change here, but a deceptively important one. Muramana, the damage toggle is changed from magic to physical. Now it is physical damage on the Muramana. This is great on Kha'Zix and Jace, champions who build tier and build Muramana. Not great on Rise. So Rise will now build Seraphs Embrace from his tier, not Muramana. No more Muramana Rise. But most people weren't building that anyway. So this is pretty much a straight buff to Muramana for Urgot, Kha'Zix, Jace, all the AD champions that built Muramana. So I think this is a smart decision. Muramana is intended to be an AD item. The damage should be physical, not magical. But that means you don't have to build hybrid magic penetration and physical penetration on a champion like Jace. You can just build armor pen, physical penetration on the Muramana. So it works really well for them. Okay, overall then, relatively small patch, not huge changes here. Biggest change is Akali, who it was very unfairly nerfed And shame on you, Riot, for giving in to 1,000 ELO players who don't know how to deal with Akali. She was fine. She did not need to be nerfed. This is way, way, way more than you should have done. It's a poor change from a balancing perspective. Very poor decision. Everything else is pretty solid. No real complaints about anything else. Most everything else is pretty smart. This was a dumb. This was the I've said before. Riot gets about 85 to 90% of their stuff right. I think they do a good job. This is the 10% that was a very poor change. Bad decision. Anyway, hopefully you guys will have a chance to play around with this. It's been out for a couple days. I've had a chance to look a little bit at this and give you my thoughts. Hope you enjoyed the video. Until next time, have a great weekend. I will try to have up another video over the channel over the weekend. If I don't get around to that, have a great time, and I will see you guys another day. Bye-bye.